right now I see Chad and Paul, I mean, Paul's in class, but Riley are virtually. All right. I got Deontay, I'm not saying your name right. Okay, just wanted to check. Landon, Riley's online. Cassidy, I don't see. Wyatt, Candace, Chad's online. Luis is here. Paul is here. Do not, has anybody seen Marquise? Josue. And how do I miss you, Mike? You're at Michael. Do you go by Mike or Michael?
Mike.
Okay. So Mike, you were at the top, so. All right, great. Now, first thing I want to say, don't forget, so what I'm going to do weekly to help everybody, for us to kind of help out so you know what's going on, is weekly I'll kind of do something like this. Syllabus quiz is due tonight, or due tomorrow night on the 19th. 10 questions. I had originally made a mistake. So the number for the Blackboard site, I had 1888. That's what it used to be. Now it changed to 866. It was supposed to be true. So it is true now. So I had typed, I made sure to call it just to make sure that was, and it wasn't a typo when they updated our syllabi. Because they updated our syllabi in May. So they might have changed that little thing. And when I made the little syllabus quiz, that was before they updated. So I did not catch that. So it's supposed to be true. You get 2 attempts, but make sure to get that in by tomorrow night because that counts as your attendance. So if you're not here, you should be turning 1 assignment in a week. At least one thing to take, stay active. So review questions, and I know that, you know, I said I had one email them to me, that's fine. But they were due last night. I wanted you to go and look at it. And then somebody didn't realize that the review questions were where I scanned it in to let us go ahead and work ahead, and was under optional resources. So I probably will this time not specifically cover them tonight because of things going on, and I'll cover them Monday. I still will go over chapter 1, but I'm not going to discuss the review questions. I'll get to them Monday, so that means you're going to have a little bit of grace. But after that, make sure to get those in on time because those are the ones, once I go over them, I give you the answer. There's no way you can turn them in because you're sitting in here and I'm going over it. So you want to get them in on time. The other stuff is kind of I'm flexible with, but the review questions, once I go over, you can't, I can't let you turn that one in late. So I definitely will not go over it today just to give everybody time. Like I said, it's first week of school, and we've already are having some that are having to isolate or stay home because of possibly a COVID exposure. They don't have it, but it's possible. So we're going to try to be as safe as we can. I want us to be on campus. I want to be on campus because I have this nice sharp where I can record really good and I can sit in here. Even if y'all are at home, I want to be here. All right, so there was the chapter 1, if you didn't know. And then I also had the MIT PDF, which is an appendix. And I'll probably talk about that in just a few minutes. So I'll try to do an announcement every week to say what our tentative schedule is. So today I'm going to start going over chapter 1, tell you what you might need to know for the final exam. If there's something I want to concentrate on, I'll say, hey, know this for the exam. There are a few questions that I have seen on the final exam, and I'm going to give you that information today. And then Monday, I have module 1, exercise 3. That's at MIT. So when I finish today, I'll go ahead and discuss that so that you'll know usually in class Monday. Monday we'll probably do the review questions. So at that point, here's what I'm gonna say, if you're not here Monday and you're doing it virtually, and we're going over the questions, and I see you're online and I ask you to give me the answer to like number one, typically we'll read it and give it the answer. If I say, okay, I'll give you credit for that, because I'm gonna grade it just the way it's supposed to be for the book. And like I said, you'll start seeing how we do it. You'll have to electronically, if you're not in class, I'm normally gonna tell you to print your review questions, give them to me, I'll update your grade and I'm gonna give them back. If you're online, you need to email me your review questions and tell me why, like where did I get that answer from? And I know some have page numbers. So this is kind of like a work, you know, as we go along, you'll get settled in, it'll be a lot easier. You'll know when you're needing to be in class, if you can't be in class, you can watch the recorded sessions. All right. So that was the one. So that's kind of where we are. We're going to be getting to those chapter 2 questions by next week. If you hadn't got your book by that time, please let me know. I don't think I have them. And like Luis, he gave me his, and one emailed him. I'm okay, but I do want to keep you, even though you're sitting in class, I like to see something come through Blackboard so they know we got class participation. Question?
So we don't have to do that exercise 1?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I hadn't put a due date. I normally kind of like to talk to you because about that exercise 1 that I have here, usually it's wanting you to, wanting you to interview, a local owner or representative, like construction manager. Well, usually I have to give you enough time for you to interview somebody. So normally first I'll say, do you know of somebody, and can you give me their name? I've had some call up an architect, but so I don't want to put you guys, I normally talk to my advisory board and ask them if they'd be willing, if you emailed them something, could you answer the questions and send it back? So that's not one that I can say, hey, I need this by next week. Because for one thing is we're relying on somebody else to, answer our questions and give us feedback. And then what questions are you gonna ask them? I normally like to look at the questions you wanna ask them, so, they're simple questions, just simple questions. You don't want to tie up their time, but you might, like I could say, what was one of the most challenging, projects you've been on, something to that effect. And was it, a good project? Did it run smoothly, or challenging because you had all kinds of issues? I mean, I could say just, I'm gonna think of something like, what was my worst surveying job? Oh, I can tell you one. So this one was, I'm just gonna give an example. Somebody asked what was one of my most worst surveying job, or what's one of my ones that I know. I usually, if I look at the plat, I look it up online and I see that it's a surveyor that I've come behind before and there is the biggest, hottest mess, then I'm gonna say now I'm not even doing surveying now, but I'll say, even when I'm way too busy, I don't have time to get to it because I know it's gonna be challenging. Second is, I knew one was all wooded, really big, jumped up wooded, and had farmlands all around it where I knew they had mowed farm. I knew there wasn't gonna be an iron on the outside whatsoever. And so they just wanted me to mark clearing limits. Couldn't find a thing. Well, once they did clear it, more within it, when it looked really pretty. It was in the country, so they were able to, within the next time they wanted me to go out there to mark where the house corners were gonna go for the septic tank permit to come, it was like that tall, shrugged over. And here I think because I've been out there before, so I knew what it looked like the first time. I think, okay, I'm gonna wear a pair of shorts, and I'm gonna be comfortable. Oh, no, it was minimum 2 feet tall in places. And I wouldn't have wore shorts if I knew that. I'm gonna wear long pants and something like that, you know, but if I saw it's open, because I took pictures of it after it was cleared, it looked beautiful. They left the big, 2 months later, it was a stark contrast, and then the guy just left a lot of that stuff stacked up. So one of the house corner was gonna fall on top of a bunch of, a pile of rubbish. And, you know, just that's some of the aggravation you can get into. So usually they can tell you, our, the city manager, city engineer manager actually went to Double Tech, and actually, he took over, first was gonna be over the, traffic services. And then something happened to the engineer manager, so they promoted him. And he was telling us about the parking deck. That was the downtown parking deck. And, you know, about that, and then he was telling us about, he said, you know, just some of the things that it went, kind of like the baseball stadium, it went over budget. It actually had one of the guys that was doing all the crane operator, he set, you know, he put a control in, he put the wrong load in, and when he did, he ended up smashing a attorney's car, he said. He said that attorney would always complain about everything they were doing, and then that's the car that got smashed, and that guy quit his job. He had been doing it for some years. But he would just kind of give us some of the humor in it and some of the bad things that happened. You know, I think some of the parking decks are way too narrow. If you've ever been in that one, Cape Fear Valley, and you're trying to go through and people are walking through. So that kind of thing, we're trying to think of questions to ask them, and then we're having to wait back on a response. And if I give you a due date and then you haven't got your response back, then you're getting stressed out because this person ain't gave you a response back. So that's why I try to wait a little bit and we find out who knows someone. If you don't know anybody, can we think of some questions? So I'm coming back to this one, but I'll wait till we're about 3 or 4 weeks in before we worry about that one. So good question. All right, let's start right here. I don't like to PowerPoint you to death. Can y'all see my screen? If you're logged into Blackboard Collaborate, can you see my screen? Okay. So this is the front of my book now. It officially fell off. That tells you how much, and I do have another one, but this is officially my book. And I'm going to start at the beginning. And I'm just going to highlight certain things that we need to know. So these first 3 chapters are, to me, very boring because they're just talking about terminology, and we're not actually able to do a bid, try to see what it costs to put a house on there. Those kind of things I think are interesting, but terminology is important, and learning, you know, learning terminology for some that have never been in this business or industry helps. So we're going to start off with, I'm not going over learning objectives, you can read those. So the construction industry today is built on the needs of the world. And it's going to be, we're trying to look at, provide shelter, conquer distances, harmless energy, create public spaces, protect from natural disasters, and build historical monuments. These basic human needs have not changed over time though the process of the environment in which the design and the constructor operates has been increasingly more complicated. So they'll tell you years ago, when we were doing this, there were maybe certain, I'm gonna start right here. So for example would be a Toronto-based company might develop a skyscraper in Dallas. It might be designed by a New York architect, and it may be constructed by a Los Angeles contractor using steel from Japan. The days of a master builder are no longer. So they had, it's called the Skyscraper series. It's on Amazon. But it used to be free where we could watch it. And it was like a 4-part series by PBS. And it showed who they chose for architect. And it was, relatively unknown, architect, but he did some beautiful things. It was called Worldwide Plaza. And it was some of the stuff was hilariously funny. But they took you from the beginning. It was the old Madison Square Gardens. And when they demolitioned that, they just put all of it in and covered it all up where the old Madison Square Gardens was. It was actually in the old area called Hell's Kitchen as well. So that's where they're going to put this big high rise, and they were going to do luxury, like living, office spaces, all kinds of stuff there. And they were in really tight quarters, so if they were trying to coordinate to get steel to the site, they would have to coordinate that to have a drop zone, because it's really congested area. Some of the funny things were that we did when they started to get in there and they had to start pulling all that old stuff out. They found all kinds of utilities underneath there, meaning water, sewer, cable, that they didn't know who owned them. And they're trying to, trace down, like around here, we'll know usually PWC might own them. We can call locate in and they'll find, what they think out if they come across all that. They were having to do explosives out there to get down and dig down in there. And when they did, the residents that lived in the neighborhood were saying that the rats were just flying out of the manholes and everything else. And they said they don't know who scared who worse. They scared the rat worse, or the rat scared them. And they started, it was just like, and you see them, they really put together to where you saw it from a contractor's point of view, the project manager's point of view. You saw some of this granite and marble that came from overseas. You saw people that lived in Hell's Kitchen that didn't want this there. But the developer was willing to upgrade their apartments for them. And it was hilarious, some of the things they were saying. If they had town hall meetings, it's thoroughly entertaining. But now that it's on Amazon, I'm not gonna make y'all have to try to watch that 4-part series. You used to get to it through YouTube or PBS, but now that Amazon has prioritize it, or they have prior to it, we cannot, and I'm not gonna ask students to do that. But it was so funny showing all the different people involved with the job that was in New York. Where they were from, how they got steel. They had to take, I think they did steel by barge from Texas all the way up the Mississippi River. I mean, so just that one person doing a job is not that way anymore. That was in the 80s. So it's definitely it's a lot different now, because everything with us using collaborating, you could be at home and being part of our classroom, and it's just technology is great. So the computer serves as an important tool in aiding of the design of projects and streamlining the control. We have CAD. Y'all know what CAD is, don't you? What's CAD stand for? Computer aided drafting. In the 80s, CAD just came out. Late 80s. They didn't have CAD in my day. It was paper and pencil. So when you made changes, that was that. We were doing a subdivision, we spent our whole winter break at school. The instructor would come in and work with us, because everything had to be done on paper and pen. We had these Leroy sets. When I say Leroy sets, stenciling. So now CAD is just like a breeze, doing our plans. But so computer aided drafting cuts back. Now you say, oh, do you drafters lose jobs? I don't think so, because I'm always getting people wanting CAD drafters, for computer aided drafting. That's how I got interested in civil, but that's kind of like my least favorite now. Also, there's building information modeling, and that's like a digital terrain form where you can transfer, facilitate, link your design and construction information all together. So that's another thing that makes it easier and has made our life a lot, like to change it. We don't have to go through all that we're going through a long time ago. And you're having to race it, and you had this little, we had like a electric racer, and you would turn it on and you could buff it off. It was awful. All right, so there's talking about CAD. There's talking about different software packages under the building information modeling. We're going to talk about the rise of environmental laws. So now you have what they call LEED. It's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. That's a rating system developed by the Green Council. That represents holistic approach to design, construction, and operation of building structures. LEED's been established as a roadmap that can be used to design and build teams to construct more sustainable green technology. And I'll explain that in just a minute. There's platinum, there's gold, there's platinum that represents the highest level of certification, followed by gold and silver. So what happens is they get points for it. It's more, LEED is more architecture, meaning more about the building components. Us as civil engineers get involved, but ours is more for low impact development, not so much LEED. But an example of something LEED would be, I'm just going to give you some examples. You know how they have the toilets and the sinks that come on automatically? That's part of the ratings. The lights that go off, and when you open the door, they come on. That's part of the energy ratings. Toilets flushing on their own, part of the energy. Like light bouncing through, this would definitely not count with those cylinders. But we got to go to a, it's on it's NC State Centennial campus. They have their fish and wildlife conservatory or building there that was on campus, and they were platinum. So they were kind of showing us, let us do a tour through there, and they were showing us inside the building what are some of the things that qualified. So they took us in the bathroom, they took us, here and there, and all of the outside the building was glass. All the building had a bunch of little stickers on. What all kinds of stickers on the outside? You know why there's stickers on the outside of the glass?
Like solar panels.
The birds were flying into them. And so many birds were getting killed because they were flying into the glass that they had to start putting stickers up on it. So it was kind of cute. Their fish and wildlife building, they had all kinds of stickers up because it was all glass. So it was kind of cute. So like, yeah, we ended up, the birds kept flying into them, boom, So we had to start putting stickers up to kind of, and they did the light, they had light bouncing through. So that gave them, if you use recycled material, that gives you points. On the outside, they showed us some of the things was they did sidewalks that were impervious, meaning the water soaks through. This is impervious, or impervious. So water can soak through this. This is a concrete. This actually is in the Tony Rand Student Center. So if you look in that parking lot, it's a different shade than asphalt than this is. So this was the first, I know they did one on campus. That was one of the first ones they've done, which is the Tony Rand Student Center. So water soaks through. It doesn't sheet off and have to go toward the storm drain. So they use You only want to use pervious where you don't have a lot of high volume traffic, big trucks, those type of things. The first big, store that I know in North Carolina that did their whole parking lot as impervious was the Lowe's in Hill Devil Hills. So out there in the Outer Banks. Every bit. Now where the trucks came in and out and pulled around back was not, but all the parking. What you use, you can actually build a bigger building if you have impervious or pervious where the water can soak through. So I can kind of quickly show you something because it's good to kind of.
I remember when we talked about previous pavers.
You talk about it in. Concrete. Be science. So here's one just to show you. I thought I had a video.
The video is probably lower now.
No, shit. I was gonna. Let's see if that's because you.
This is pervious concrete. It is durable, strong, and water can flow right through it. This video will show you how to make it.
I've seen
Regular
them with
concrete
the
uses rock and sand mixed with cement.
That wasn't one I wanted. I wanted to see it where here. That's what I wanted to see. Ultimate.
From my experience using permeable paving today, especially I've done a lot of residential block paving permeable systems. This is the first time I used a top mix permeable paving. So yeah, quite a bit of experience using permeable materials before. Top mix permeable materials is so good as in the way it can deal with the water in such a quick amount of time. Obviously experiencing heavy rainfall days with compared to the block paving systems I've used, it deals with it so quickly.
Right. Yeah. So that would be something that you would qualify for LEED. Another thing is planting certain wildlife or certain type of plants that don't require a lot of maintenance to them. So they had some of where they were routing the water to some natural retentions. That would be low impact development. So that would be part of it. Here's what we're having issues with now is issues with how the laws are changing. So conditions under which projects were built are involving the laws, the regulations, the permits, the procedures, the project teams must navigate to bring the project to completion. In 1993, they studied that they found there were 120 environmental laws in place at that time compared to only 13 in 1955. So most of the laws are governed by the construction today are put in place decades ago using the 70s and 80s, but they're getting more sophisticated. City, state, county, and which projects site dictates the cost, schedule, probability of success, completing the project. That makes getting approvals to build one more difficult than the design and the construction of the project. So I've had people, I had an engineer or surveyor, one of the surveyors said, when one of the hurricanes went through, one of the builders wanted to try to set up like a warehouse for the homeowners to store their stuff while he's redoing houses for them, because they might, do a rental house or do something like that. So it was in the city. So in the city of Evel, he was wanting to put up a warehouse just to store, some of the homeowners' furniture while he was trying to rebuild them house. Well, because of the UDO ordinance, which is the ordinances that are in the Evel, the amount, since it was gonna abut a residential neighborhood, the specific trees that they request that he would plant would be $80,000 worth of trees. And the man's like, there's no way that that I can afford. So, I mean, go ahead and stop doing it now, because if that's what they're gonna require, you don't even work on getting it submitted for approval. He's trying to do them a site plan to be able to get it, and they're like, no, you gotta have these certain amount of trees, they have to be full grown, they gotta be this, they gotta be that. So they make it tough. So like I'm saying, ordinance have came along and they've updated them. Same with today, we were looking at violations for that surveyors and engineers have done. We looked at a 2000 flyer, and they were just real simple. Now they get real detailed. When they find you, they got a whole list of things that they're saying that you didn't do right, that your policy says we're supposed to do right. So just things over time seem to increase. Paperwork increases, and it does. Don't cut back on paperwork, it seems like it increases paperwork. So, based off that, this chapter is going to kind of look at the construction industry in general. It's going to focus, so let me get it. So I just talked about all the numbers of the environmental laws, they're impacting you. And you're not going to be able to get a chance. Sometimes it might be, you're going to do like a preliminary, you might just want to meet with, and I have had this where I've met with the developer and maybe the city or the developer and PwC, and we talk about, is it going to be something that's going to be doable? You know, what are they going to concentrate on until they put some, I'll normally do a sketch and say, this is kind of what we're thinking about doing, what's your thoughts? Before I do any surveying, I'm gonna go ahead and say, let's submit a site plan, let's submit something through. I can survey after you get a preliminary, because the preliminary is not gonna cost you but $100, versus if I go out there and survey it and then they're gonna tell you can't do what you wanna do, then, you're out somebody's surveying fee, or an engineering fee, or to draw it up. So typically I'm saying, let's spend, a little bit, let's do a preliminary, let's submit it through, let's see what we can do, because they are going to come up with some condition sheets. So we're going to look at the construction industry in general, focus on the characteristics, the nature of the industry. We're going to look at the future. We're going to examine the project. We're going to define what a project is, how it's organized. We're going to look at the complex of the technical training required to succeed as an architect or engineer. Doesn't allow for a lot of room so we do not practice outside our expertise, or we're not going to take on a brand new job and introduce impervious pavement if we aren't familiar with it, because we know we're probably going to be held liable. Y'all research in engineering blunders in your EGR 115 class, ones that had that with Mr. Allen. We'll talk about more engineering blunders, so we're going to talk about that. Usually when I do some of my continuing ed for my license, I did one for engineering blunders, because I wanted to see, what has happened around here, what can we learn, learn from it, who was liable for it, and that kind of thing. Most construction management programs, on the other hand, spend considerable time addressing leadership management, and they may make these program graduates better placed to lead the diverse teams that make up today's complex construction project. So that's a totally different industry. Is construction project management. So that's where I concentrated mostly as for construction project management, not so much, and it's a breakdown from civil. So you could go on and get a 4-year degree. ECU has construction project management, Western Carolina does, but they're not putting out the graduates to meet the market demand. So they have came to Federal Tech and say, hey, we're looking for your associate's degree people. One guy that came actually was a graduate of here Actually, I went to school with him in Charlotte, and he was a graduate here, and we knew each other, and he come back, and he said, if I can give back to the community, I want to. But his company is in Charlotte, but they were trying to recruit, to say if anybody's ever Charlotte, if they want a job, we got it. Because ECU's not putting enough of the project management out. So civil's, the good thing about civil's a discipline that it encompasses a lot of different jobs. Construction and project management, estimating are two different ones. CAD, surveying. The one that came last week, one of my former students came last week, he's one of the lab managers at ECS Carolina. So he works in the lab doing concrete tests in soils, and he was doing a concrete mix design. He's probably only been out of Charlotte 2 to 3 years, and he's already passed his fundamentals of engineering exam. So there's different paths. Our degree is meant for you to go to work, because that's what this is meant to do, go to work, earn money when you get out. But there's a lot of opportunities for going to work and a lot of opportunities if you want to further your education. So as we talk about, we're going to talk about what's under federal, what's under state, what would fall under the locate, would fall under these different ones. So let's talk about an example of one would be federal. You might have federal highways. So if you have a highway, so something for Department of Transportation, it's still federal, state, and local. Now I know I did, and I'll pull one up. I have one of the condition sheets for one of the things in town, and it had to go through the local fire and police to make sure there's fire control, make sure you have sprinkler system, make sure that they can, if it's in the city limits, that they can give you police protection. There was a lot of things that were on that list. I know I probably can't get to it right now, but I'll make sure to bring in the next class to show you a condition list that came from the city, all the things that they require us to do before they approve a project. Pretty crazy. So it could be conservation law, it could be historical, could be, so an example of historical, I'll kind of talk about that. We did Martin Luther King from Hayes Street to Robinson Street. They came across a brass shovel, which was dated back to, because that was Arsenal Avenue and there was some historical stuff in there. So they actually, Smithsonian has that brass shovel that was uncovered when they were putting utilities in. So then the Museum of Arts, there's one right there at Hayes Street. There's a museum. They started coming out there on our job sites and came out there with their metal detectors. And they were out there constantly, I guess, looking for stuff. Because when they dug down, the sides of especially where the bridges were way up. So when they dug down or hit utilities, they're out there. But little did I know until later on that when some of the guys that were working with us were snickering, they were out there throwing nails and everything they could to like get them out there and keep them busy all day long. So, but they were out there with their metal detectors and they're out there throwing stuff out, and they told me later on they didn't find anything else, but they did find that. But they were out there then for the next couple of weeks trying with their metal detectors, trying to look and see if they can find some other artifacts. And they're out there trying to derail them. Civil engineers, so it could be a designer, it could be transportation engineers, architects, or graphic designers. All of those would be under design. So usually civil and survey go hand in hand. One's got to do the preliminary ahead of time, civil designs it, and then they hand it back to the surveyors to lay it out. When you start talking about construction, you may have a project manager. There might be construction contractors, material suppliers, equipment suppliers, and labor. So I'll tell you about a quick job. I was doing the surveying for a project. There were luxury townhomes off Ramsey Street called Long Hill Point. They had a construction manager because the owner for it was from Virginia. So he had an engineering firm that he contracted with, and they subbed out the survey to me. And nobody had asked for any work, it had to go through his construction. They had one guy on the site in a job trailer. It had to run through him, anything that happened. Now, there wasn't a lot of room for materials, so the first thing they put in, and I don't know why they wouldn't have put storm drain in, but they put sewer in. And they had a contractor that they had worked with out of Charlotte. So they were used to working with this contractor, but then he hired local guys to put it in. And they had such a mess of it, it wasn't even funny. They had sewer on reverse grade. They actually were told, PwC was out there and told them, you're not gonna put that dirt back in because it's unsuitable. You're gonna have to bring sludge fill off site. They're like, well, someone's not gonna pay for that. So they threw it back in there. Owner caught somebody out there, got a soil scientist out there. Sure enough, it's not gonna fly. They had to take it back up. I think they brought select fill in at that point, but they had their grade so far off that PwC wouldn't even accept it, so they never got paid for it. And then they just disappeared. So you had material that had to come out there, so they had to store the material without it being stolen, because you're gonna store material. So and I have seen subdivisions where material has came in, they hired a guard to walk around. Somebody to walk around at night with all the construction that was going on, not to get vandalized. I rode through a subdivision, seen every window torn out of it, every window, like an open house, every window. They have done that, because that's what you call windows, or especially ones that are, for, I can say, a dentist office. Dr. Hedgecote. This dentistry behind Rayford Road. He had specialty windows came in and they were vandalized, and the wait time to get the new windows in was 6 months. So having material suppliers and equipment suppliers and all that sitting idle and vandalized or brought to the job too soon, that's where us as either estimators or project managers are starting to get involved. Then you have consultants. They could be your testing laboratories, like I talked about ECS Carolinas, surveyors, and public relations. So there's where we fit in there. So typically, because of us, we don't have time to do a lot of research and development. Traditionally, we're focused on cash flow, and it's almost completely driven by projects and their schedules. So as a result, there's little initiative for individual companies to invest in research and development. The little investment that does exist is at your university levels. U.S. engineering and construction companies have done any significant research aimed to improve construction processes. Not only are most projects pushed through on tight timetables, but there are risk failures and lawsuits. Thus, designers, owners tend to be very conservative and specify the product they want used on a project. So we'll find out in the next chapter about the Hyatt Regency, what happened with the Hyatt Regency. Did y'all have that in does anybody have that one in your EGR 115 class? Did you remember that? Well, it was a hotel where the skywall collapsed.
When we were talking, we had to do projects on different chain disasters.
Mhm.
That was one of the topics.
Was like a party or something where like almost
Yeah, people were having a
died?
party and they were
They
dancing
were.
on those.
They were.
And it collapsed.
It did, and it was because of the material, when the material suppliers decided instead of putting one rod all the way through from top to bottom, he separated them off and did it with a nut and bolt, so it wasn't given the continuous, and when it broke, but the engineer took his, idea and said, yeah, that's fine, signed off on it, and they found him liable for those deaths. I think it was 130 some deaths. So, in other words, before you sign off on something, make sure you know you know, if you specify something, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna specify, and I'm gonna specify what I know works. I'm not gonna do any research and development, because look what happens. I have been somewhere where I've seen a pedestrian bridge collapse. And I think it was just due to, rusting and corrosions. I don't know that anybody was at fault. But you look like bridges are only made for 20 to 30 years. They need to go in and check them, especially, I had one of the students that actually ended up getting, he was come back to school, he worked for DOT, he couldn't move up because he did not have an associate's degree. He came back to get civil and geomatics, and it was during the hurricane time, and he was over bridge inspection and maintenance. So he was like, well, I know I'm gonna be out a while. He goes, because I have never, when all those bridges were underwater, how they had to move all them signs around to the road. And he goes, I have never been cussed out by so many little old ladies, because they want to cross there, and you can't even see the tops of where the bridge is. You can't even see the top, but they were going just over there, and we're gonna go through it. He said he asked somebody to go up with him, a bridge was on fire. Somebody had done set them up a bonfire up underneath there. So he gets there, ain't nobody know what happened, but they're sitting over there just hanging out watching him work. Well, they were trying to warm themselves or something, caught the bridge on fire. Yeah. So,
That's unfortunate.
yeah, that was unfortunate. And then you know, so I'm just telling you that there are things that we're gonna have to inspect. So we actually design, we usually oversee construction, and we're maintaining. So civil has a job for life almost. Do you gotta think? We design, we construct, and we maintain. When we construct, we oversee construction. And then we have to maintain it. We have to see what's going on. We have to look at the life cycle. So it's like it starts all over again. So with infrastructure. So who are our players? And I think it is about 4:53. So I'm gonna be looking at the players. I'm gonna take a quick break. I am not gonna mute the mic. I'm not gonna stop recording, because the other day I did that and then forgot to come back in. So we're gonna take us a good 10-minute break, and we will probably finish this out pretty quick. And I will talk about, the MIT project. And then we'll knock out, get up and move. Y'all been in CAD all day. Some of y'all had CAD this afternoon. I've been teaching since really 10 this morning. And Kim, I think I'm not probably going to have an extra Wednesday before Labor Day, that September 1st will be our first 2 week day. We'll do our survey.
Okay.
I'll keep y'all all in the loop.
I enjoyed listening to your little bio. I listened to it last night. How you got started and all that, the first surveyor.
Yeah, I still am, but it was funny me coming out there, and they were dying and laughing. I showed up out there with I used to have them swatches where they matched, and I showed up there with a swatch and white kid tennis shoes on I-40 to be put on a bridge job. To the minute I went up, I came right down on my butt. And they laughed. They pulled a lot of, they got me more with jokes than I ever got them.
Well, I'm sure they had a good time.
They did, probably the biggest one they did. No, they did a couple of things to me. There was this guy, his name was Tiny. He worked for the construction. This was on, Morgan Road. Big guy, so lazy on the open one eye at a time. They told him I liked him.
Oh my God.
So he'd always blow a kiss at me.
Oh my God.
And so they stuck me one time. So also, we had those big, suburban yellow trucks. So I told them one day to drop me off for lunch. And I wanted them to drop me off back, because then we're gonna go somewhere else and eat. We usually So I was meeting some friends. So they dropped me off out back, but then they rode around blowing the horn. Then to pick me up, telling me, no, they pulled right up front. Park, get out to the only place that I could get in was the driver's seat.
Oh my God.
So they did that to me. And then, one would be always blowing the horn if I was driving too tiny. So I tried to back him off, and there was a guy that was retired military, really quiet. He was behind me. No, what did he do? He leans over and blows the horn at Tiny to make sure Tiny sees him.
Uh-huh.
So they kind of like, they gave me, I guess you could say, what do you call that, initiation stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't bad, but, we pick on each other and
Yeah.
kind of try to make it fun. But,
Yeah.
that, they got me a couple of times.
Alright, so, let me look at
Y'all better good you run out there, don't you?
that. Wednesday after Labor Day, is that what you said?
Before,
It'll be first.
Mhm.
At what time?
6. Yeah, we'll grab our surveying equipment at 6 and get out, then, they have class, we'll come up here and run them 2 months.
And meet,
Here.
right,
Yeah, because our equipment's all in, they're in storage, so we'll just get it out and we'll go down probably maybe an hour and a half.
okay.
And we'll just try to set it up every other.
Okay. Sounds good.
So next week I'll get day ones out, but it'll take them probably 2 weeks to do it. We do an hour and a half when we're all having to take turns looking. Drive to instrument, you got 4 people, we can put one in the instrument, 2 on the water, and then switch back out. So you get more hands-on in a smaller setting.
Right, okay.
When you get offered survey two, is that what
Summer.
summer?
Don't ask Riley about it. I think he was telling Candace about a survey too the other day, wasn't he? Riley?
Yeah, he said it was tough,
Oh, was it?
that's what he said.
And I only say it's tough. There was not one person that didn't make us feel better. I mean, nobody didn't. It's just, it is higher level because it is, that the civil engineers have seen some of these problems on their exam, and I've seen them on mine as a survey exam. Because,
I wish I
it's
would've
just
done-
formulas, so it's not that if y'all can pass math, y'all can pass anything.
Yeah, I wish I would've taken one time the 2 before surveys, so I had like an understanding of cost and time and all that.
We're just gonna do basic.
Even
That's
that.
all you did, basic trivia, in survey 1, right?
Yeah.
It's just, and I teach when I teach the right triangle.
Yeah.
So just basic trig. So did you use that same orange textbook?
Yeah.
Y'all covered like 12 chapters, 13 chapters?
We really didn't even need the textbook.
What'd you use then?
They just have like, the course material online that we use as an outline.
Did you buy the book?
Yeah.
Why, I usually use the book just because of.
I'm glad I got it now. So.
Yeah, in survey 2, we use it. We predominantly use it as I use like the examples out of it. Even if somebody finds an older thing, examples didn't change, but yeah, when we're doing a 8-week section of survey 2, it goes fast too.
So then, when do you guys offer survey 3? Is that like a fall?
We're doing it right now.
Oh, okay.
So survey 2, I had 10 people in it this summer. I had 5 do it virtually and I had 5 in class. So it depends on, mostly Riley was here, David was here, some were always here. And then some just came in to proctor on the exam, but they had to watch the lectures. They had to keep up with that. So thank you for all that got their review questions in on time. And if you hadn't, just make sure you get them in before, so I can look at them over the weekend.
Yeah, I didn't know we had a movie by right now.
Yeah, I had it, that's why I put them in the, and I'll make sure I'll do an announcement weekly, but looking, it's hard to see that they're not color coded, those calendars are hard to see. But I'll at least, I gave you really a day's notice on that one. That's why Monday, I'll normally give you some notice ahead of time for something at least where you can kind of work ahead. So I'll try to do like 2 weeks at a time, let you know what we're gonna be going over for next week. Oh, there they, okay, I had two online. I knew I saw them too. I'll go ahead and start. Starting. Be back up. All right, so who are our players? We want to talk about the owner. So I have seen a question like this on the exam, so maybe I better wait to I'll go ahead and start and I'll make sure to tell them that the owner The owner is also called the client or the person or organization that will pay for the bills as well as receiving the ultimate business for the finished project. The owner is responsible for determining what the project will include or the scope, when the project can begin and end, and how much he or she can afford to spend. I might have seen it say who should be in charge of setting the goals for the project, something to that effect. So you're gonna say owner. The owner. So I don't know if it's on a review question or it's on the final exam. I want to think I saw it on the final exam, and I want to think I saw it on the final exam for the project management part, but it was on the final exam. So Landon, I was telling them, the players, the owner is in charge of setting the goals or the scope of the project. I do remember that on something, so just note that in your head, put a note in your, highlight your book, whatever, because I'm pretty sure, like I did last year, I'll send you home with your exams and then tell you to bring them back to me. So the owner can also be broken down into two categories, public or private. So public ones could be, they exist for the benefit of citizens. That could be the general public. So examples of those would be like a town library, an interstate or a highway, army barracks. So with that, typically you have to publicly advertise with all qualified and responsible bidders given the opportunity to complete wage rates, bonding requirements are also stipulated. So I actually have worked on ones that we've done several for PwC. And I was riding through, actually last night, coming to the Gillis Hill area, and I was like, oh yeah, we did all the design for the water main going through here. So we had to advertise it in the newspaper, and we had to put together all the bid packages for the contractors to come pick it up. So they have to bid on it simultaneously. So we had contract documents, the plans, all of that we had to prepare, set up and advertise. It had to be advertised. Normally you'll see it's AGC plan room that most of them will go to look it up. But we had to advertise in the newspaper. And because it was going to be federally funded or funded, so there's different credentials you have to do. Now, if it's private, now private could be a subdivision, it could be shopping malls, hospitals, universities. If they're private, you can choose your own contractor. You don't have to put it out for bid and choose, whoever the lowest one is. When we when we were wanting to get the surveying equipment, we talked to one of the surveying firms that actually put it out. It's like $26,000 for equipment that we just got this past spring. But because it was so expensive, it had to be put out for bid. Even though I got a quote from them, what they came in with was lower, but we had to put it out for bid. And then we can't talk to them at that point. So I couldn't talk to them and say, hey, you got to, put that the buyer has to put it out for bid. I can't talk to them because that's a violation. So I don't think they put a bid in for it, and then the other company got it. We paid more money than what we originally were paid for because I can't talk to them because that's a legality. But usually things that are funded, and even though it's private, when you start getting something that expensive, like I said, we put it out for a bid, it's opened up, it's sealed with the envelopes, and when things are put out for bid for DOT or for PwC, it's sealed and they're opened up all at one time. The lowest bid wins, no matter what. So a lot of times you want to make sure you're bidding apples to apples, and we'll talk about that later on too. So I've worked on a lot of different projects and with the specifications, and we'll be talking about that in this class. So that would be private and public and the owner. Now you also have the design professional. That would be architects, engineers, and design consultants. The major role of the designer is to interpret and assist the owner in developing a project scope, a budget, a schedule. So you're assisting him. He's the one doing it, but you're assisting. You prepare the construction documents that will be used by the construction contractor to build the project. In almost all cases, design professionals is licensed, registered professional, is responsible for all the physical integrity of the project. In the United States, each state licensed architects and engineers who are allowed to practice within that state. To obtain a license to be a professional must be demonstrated by competency, a combined degree of experience, and examination. So I know architects are maintained. I don't know who maintains theirs, but I can tell you who maintains the engineers. The North Carolina Board of Engineers and Surveyors. So they maintain both of our engineering and surveying. So we talked about that in survey one, so it kind of goes together. So the purpose of the registration is to guarantee the public and the construction project will be built in accordance with accepted design standards and will comply with local safety standards. Professional associations, material suppliers, manufacturing, testing associations, and building code agencies are all producers of standards that must be understood and followed. So even though we're not a material supplier or vendor, we have to understand a little bit of those utilities. I didn't really quite understand until I worked at PwC and I had to start putting in to make sure that we had material on site to do it with. When I thought, usually when I did a bid for a manhole, it was just one manhole lump sum. Oh, I didn't know there was 3 points, three separate parts of the manhole until I started looking at their details. And I was like, well, I've always just priced it as per manhole. I didn't know you had to have the bottom part, and then there's the next part, and the top part, and the rim, and all of that, until I started doing in-house jobs and had to make sure all the material got to the job site and how it was priced. So over time, this comes, most of the stuff you're getting in school is just, you'll say later on, oh man, that's what she's talking about. That's what she's talking about. You know, just over time, it then comes to me, oh yeah, now I'm putting it all 2 and 2 together. It might not register right now, but 10 years down the road, oh yeah, now I got it. Same with surveying. That's how surveying was for me. I'm gonna laugh about that because I'm a surveyor. So normally, the constructor, that's the one responsible for interpretation of contract documents, the physical construction. The project rests with the constructor. The term constructor is relatively new depending on the chosen delivery. Constructor is an umbrella term with the term meaning a contractor, general contractor, prime contractor, or construction manager. So the constructor in terms of a prime contractor is responsible for delivering a completed project in accordance with the construction documents. In most cases, the prime contractor divides the work among subcontractors on a large project. Some subcontractors may be divided up by work. So now other projects, material vendors, those are your suppliers, the ones that supply. So you might see the word material vendors, they're suppliers. Material vendor, like if I wanted to order the manholes, or I needed trusses to go for a house, or something that's going to come to the shop, those are material vendors. Typically, we might put, for PwC, we would put bids out for that, get a couple of different bids on certain things that they didn't have in the house. So material vendors assure that the material is needed to construction and arrives to the project site on time and in the correct form. And then often building components may be prefabricated or installed by the supplier. So some of that might come prefab together. So equipment manufacturers are also suppliers and also play a major role. Equipment can be rented, purchased, A financial institution plays a major role in determining where the money's gonna come from, how the funding will be set up, and the terms and condition of the funding. Government officials are also involved early in the project in respect to zoning approvals, insurance on a building permit, government inspections. Government inspections ensure the construction is completed correctly in accordance to the codes and industry. So if we were doing a PWC job, and let's say I was doing it for an owner, they're gonna have their inspector out there so making sure things are done right, because they're gonna be the one taking it over. The project also must have insurance. So insurance comes in many forms. It could be property insurance to an owner, liability insurance to a designer, bonding insurance to a constructor, and then contracts, it depends on what contracts are being prepared. Companies also consult lawyers to advise their clients to minimize liability and risk. So when I was doing with surveying, I had to choose, my liability insurance. And it really is not, you'd think it'd be real expensive, but I talked to one of the engineers I did a lot of subcontract work with, and I said, well, my insurance company can do 300,000, they do 500,000, they could do $1 million. And what would you recommend? He said, I would go with $1 million. It was only $90 more a year. He said, because you could be doing a Fort Bragg job that requires you to have $1 million liability policy. So, when I first started getting into that and learning, I consulted to other people about, what insurance pays on. I think about $500 a year for liability insurance. And that was for $1 million. So definitely that's something that we have to take into consideration too. All right, what are the future outlooks? So the U.S. economy has been global. There are opportunities to work throughout the world. At the same time, U.S. companies continue to experience more foreign competition at home. Contractors are increasingly forced to cope with diminishing number of skilled craftspeople. Robots and other high-tech equipment are being introduced, and that they cannot totally be replaced for the highly human skilled craft persons. So we do have the new robot. So it puts you surveying by yourself. So you could survey by yourself. 26,000 is what our robot costs with GPS. I know at Goodyear, they have tire machines, they have robot tire machines. But they still have a person that has to stay there with it the whole time. But they do have robot tire machines, so they're telling you things are going to robots. They're not totally going to be replaced, but because some of our stuff has to have, human craftsperson. Normally the robots see something's wrong. So increased number of government regulations and required environmental permits, as well as continually shifting legal environments, will challenge the future of our constructors. So projects can always continue to get larger, more technical, require more specialized people, high-tech equipment, better control systems. So this trends will require that tomorrow's project leaders have technical, business, organizational, and leadership savvy to complete the project successfully. So as related to these, the fact that more and more of today's projects will be built in congested areas or locations on existing sites where these are renovations, like I was telling y'all that Worldwide Plaza was at the old Madison Square Gardens. Projects can be very tricky with issues dealing with disposal of waste, asbestos, PVC, and everything else. So renovations, you don't know what you're going to get into. The next thing I talk about, I do know you will see. It's not this. It's right there. So I think it was one of your review questions. The construction project. A project's defined, whether it's construction or not, by the following: a defined goal or objective, specific tasks not routinely performed, a defined beginning and end, defined deliverables, and resources. So the goal would be, goal for construction is simple. to build something. So typically there's only one Golden Gate Bridge, one Sears Tires, and one Alaskan Pipe. So they say they're generally unique. So projects are usually characterized as having a single start and ending point, and all the work in the middle. So that would be the third thing about defining beginning and end. Because projects are generally one-time ventures, a bad road trip can lead to the wrong direction and wasting time and money. Define deliverables. They are what the owner establishes as the program that is further classified as the contract documents by the design professional. A certain quantity of work will be completed according to a certain specification within a certain time frame. And the last thing would be resources. And resource are time, money, labor, and equipment, materials. We talk about all of that usually, and those are paid by the owner. And that's more, we talk about that more on the project management side. So projects begin with a stated purpose, a goal established by the owner. That is, there's the word goal, established by owner. So I know you do see that at some point on an exam. That will be accomplished by the project team as the team begins to choose the design, the estimate, and the plan out the project. Members can learn more about the project that was little known to begin with. So once you start getting in there and we start looking at it, then the more we take into consideration as time moves on, the project team spiral goes outward, because the more is known, the more information is needed to be considered. Projects build up slowly as workers and equipment are brought to the job early on, and that will be right here. So usually it's going to speed up real quick. Projects, you're gonna, early on, we're gonna have, early on, only a few activities may occur, but once mobilization is set up and it's getting completed, then it proceeds rapidly, like an S curve. So out there at Long Hill Point, those luxury townhomes, after they got roughly the streets designed, then they had their builders coming out there putting in those, so they were building. We're getting the buildings going up, the roads were going in, the storm drain was going in. After sewers, first thing they did was water. And those buildings, there would be about, and they were, when I say luxury, there were so many sharp turns and corners. There was like, I'd say 50 points per building that we had to stake out. And then once concrete got in, we had to come back and put a nail where every corner of where they laid out every brick out there. So it was going pretty quick once they started going. To begin with, it was kind of slow. They weren't taking over the sewer, but once things got going, they had several different contractors out there on the job all working together. So it ramped up, and then it goes out. What are some of the project types? And I'll give you a hint to that. Residential. We have residential, building construction, heavy construction, and industry. So residential would be, projects include individual homes as well as small condominium and apartment complexes. So that would have been, the one I did would have been residential. These projects tend to be privately funded by individual owner and their own use or developer profit. Such projects are typically designed by architect, but in some single homes may be designed by the individual homeowner or the builder. The one builder I work with did their own plans. And then they would offer the different plans out. And if not, they would design more plans if somebody wanted something bigger. So building construction projects. And their examples of those would be office buildings, large apartment buildings, shopping malls, and theaters. Projects such as these are either designed by an architect with engineering support and are generally built by a general contractor. Most of these are privately funded, though some projects like schools and courthouses and city offices are publicly funded. Heavy construction projects. So I think some of the terminology that the book uses, they called it heavy engineering.
Yeah, I saw that.
So you didn't really have a choice for, it's the same. Heavy construction is heavy engineering. I don't know why they just didn't leave it, heavy construction, if that's what they're gonna tell you, and then change the wording up. But these are also called infrastructure. They're projects known by the roadways, bridges, dams, and tunnels. These projects are designed principally by civil engineers and built upon by heavy construction contractors, having engineering backgrounds or support. These projects usually are publicly funded and therefore sensitive to government policies. Last one is industrial. These are like steel mills, petroleum refineries, chemical processing plants, automobile production facilities. Those are examples of industrial projects. All right, so project teams. Now, this, I don't know if this is in your book. We just went over there. But this is what I'm going to want you to base. Yeah, this right here. This is called the project team. This is when I talk about this Monday, this is what I'm going to want you to look for when you look at the MIT. So Monday in class, we'll kind of be talking about this, and it'll be due Monday night. When I say I want you to do a write-up, this is going to be chapter 1, exercise 3. We'll do our review questions, and then we'll talk about this. It's going to be read the appendix. The appendix is in the optional resources right now on Blackboard, so you can, if you haven't got your book, you're still okay with this. I'm going to want you to look at the MIT project. And I want you to look at the project team selection, and then kind of cite examples in the case studies that correspond with the description of the role of the project team. So here's what they say for the project team is. So your first step is the management process. So they arrive at the clear goals. They define what they are, the goals of the project, and understand what problems the project is designed to solve. Depending on the project type, as just mentioned, the role of the owner, designer, and contractor varies, but they varies as does the time and budget allowed. Yet the job of these people, the core project managers team, to define the project and arrive at a detailed description of the program that's understood by the entire team and endorsed by the owner. So I'm going to give you just a quick thing about MIT. So MIT was it's a university, and they were looking at renovating. They were looking at renovating some of their buildings on their Massachusetts Institute for Technology, and I know they're big in engineering. They were looking at renovating or demolishing. So so they actually do a project team, and they actually hire a construction project manager and an architect that work close together to kind of look at what, because at first they were going to demolish stuff and do a new building altogether. But once they got looking in there and they saw how much it was going to cost and how much, if you were demoing it, what all would take right in the middle of a campus, and they knew it was going to be disruptive, they decided to renovate instead of demo. So that's kind of something where I'm going to say, what's the project team do? You can say, okay, architect and project manager came together. They met, looked at it, and decided, what do we need to do ahead of time? What can we solve? Before we start doing plans and put things out to bid, what's the easiest way to do this? The second role, so you would just tell me from chapter 1, this is what the first step would be, and then cite an example. And kind of just like what I said, they hired them, they decided this was going to happen. 2, a second role of the project team is problem solving. And the team sometimes needs to do a tremendous amount of investigation to develop alternative solutions to problems or conflicts. So they did that in several things. once they went in and saw what they renovated, there were certain things that they knew they could upgrade, and there's certain things that didn't warrant extra stuff. So you'll see several examples in there about how they did problem solving. Okay, so the next step is a detailed plan. So still, when you're problem solving, you evaluate alternative solutions. You kind of look at that. You see what is called value. You look at the measure of quality balance versus the budget and see if something warrants an alternative. So that's what they did. There's several examples in the book or in that MIT, and it's loaded in there. The next step is develop a detailed plan. And that will realize the selected programs. This work plan lays out the specific tasks, responsibility of all involved, and establishes the resource budget and schedule parameters. It's described involving the key project team members, the designer, the owner, the constructor, and the consultants. So that would be coming out with a detailed plan. And they do come up with a detailed plan. So they decided to design it all together, but then they bid it all together, but they only did construction one at a time. And you'll see something like that in there. So I'll just tell you to kind of say under the project team, is a detailed plan. And then implementing the plan. So next, project team will implement the plan. That would be, and the control of the project. As the plan moves to the field, so this will be the construction, the contractor mobilizes all the equipment, suppliers, vendors who will be involved in the project, and they evaluate the process and make adjustments. As the project nears the end, the project team will make all final adjustments and evaluate the final performance. Finally, the project manager assesses the success of the project. If the team did not end up as planned, all must ask why. It's important to learn from the work so the success are incorporated in future projects and mistakes are not repeated. So typically what we do is, we are out in the survey crew, or any changes we kept them all on one set of plans. If changes happen different than what was planned, then weather, delays, we'll start talking about looking at what can cause something to extend past the time. And what are we gonna look at, when we get to the end to make sure next time we don't have that. Because usually plans are just a guideline. And when you get out there and you get in real life scenarios, things have to be changed. Because most time, a lot of times people that design these plans have never been outside. And I'm telling the truth. So I was really thankful that I worked outside to begin with, because then I became a better designer for the inside. And normally I'm the one that I'd rather have somebody run the instrument for me, and me to be the person on the rod. So everywhere I step, I know where I step, and I can draw the lines, because I'm usually the one drawing it plain. So I really think the outside helps you be better inside. But it doesn't always work that way, because usually when you work for big corporations, you might be hired just to do design. So with that said, one of my students got an AutoCAD job for PwC. And I knew, what his goal was and what he wanted to do. I said, well, what do you think about that? Because I knew I figured he'd probably do maybe CEI inspection, because he wouldn't want to be tied down to a desk. He said, look, they don't tell us we have to stay in the office. The other CAD person likes to stay in, so she gets to stay in, but I get to go outside if I want to see what they're doing, survey crews doing, or I want to be out looking at the job. I can't. They encourage that. So he said, I like to kind of see where it works, but the other girl doesn't, so she didn't have to. But they give me that opportunity. So I'm doing something different every day. He said, I love it. So, that's what I wanted to hear. Okay, so I think actually so I was talking to Mr. Manus the other night about that. And that guy's moving up, and I think the one that's the survey tech is gonna move to the CAD job. So there's gonna be a survey tech position coming up soon. And actually the guy that got the survey tech position, he was working for PwC in water and sewer engineering. And then he had to take another job, so he quit coming to school for 1 semester because they wouldn't work at all with his schedule. And then the survey tech position came open, he got back to PwC. So over the last probably 4 years, he's already graduated with geomatics and will work on the civil. So we were able to work it out with PwC, and then to let, I've had several come there that whatever might be the night program, night class 1 semester, be the day class the next one. So it's kind of neat to see them go from not going to school to coming back to school, and the different jobs that are involved, and not having to relearn a trade, but go from surveying to a drafting, a CAD tech. And the other one's gonna go to door modeling. So any questions for me? So Monday, I'll start the review questions at the beginning of the class. After we finish that, then I'm gonna let you loose on the MIT, and need to kind of be looking at the review questions. If you don't have your book, you might want to get with somebody who does have to take their book and take some snapshots of their book so that you can move ahead. If you have it online, I'm fine, fine with you having an online book. But you might want to, while you're waiting. I don't want you to be paying real expensive prices. If you can find it online and you have it for the whole year, because we do it for 2 classes, that's fine. I wouldn't recommend an older version, because the older version, the questions are a little bit different and the text is a little bit different. But it's been around probably 7 or 8 years. So hopefully you can find it. But if you hadn't, check with somebody that's with you and see if you can get a picture of on Monday what the review questions are, so Tuesday you can get them turned in, and we'll start probably chapter 2. I'm good if y'all are good. Anybody that's online have questions?
Does anybody have to look yet?
Yeah, I do.
Can I see pictures of